wish. This whole world will be a place of darkness.
Alyssa, it's us. It's us he can't defeat.
Take the fire from my hand.
Question. Nobody reached renewal? Do I get my 4 years back?
Zardoz betrayed us. We were hunters, not farmers.
My king, I couldn't do it. Excalibur cannot be lost.
One day, the king will come, and the sword will rise again.
Greetings all, and welcome to the Restitutor Orbis live stream, where we're going to be exploring old world connections in film. So I'll just go ahead and rattle off with the greetings. Hey Chris, good to see you. Breaking free from narcissism, welcome. Jamie, good to see you. I got it that you'll renew, no worries. Hey Kathy, welcome. Brown Dwarf, good to see you. Albe Belt, welcome. Let's see who else we got. Paul for Krista, good to see you. Dr. Maniac, Vaughn's Truth, welcome. Robert, welcome. Hey, Gemma, good to see you for a live stream. Hi, Sarah, welcome. Hey, Howard Harrison. Rebecca, good to see you. Hi, Eric. Hey, Sherry. I'll rest when I'm ashes. Great saying. Good to see you. Hey, Dr. Enyo, good to see you. Jory, welcome. Criminal with Badges, good to see you. Appreciate it. Hey, Dustin. Hey, Many Fires. Patricia, welcome. And looks like we got Dukes there. Welcome. Carmen, welcome. G. Hart, welcome. Music Holds the Secret, welcome. Well, it's good to see everybody here tonight. Hey, Jerry, welcome. Greetings in Detroit. Hope things are going well there in whole Motown. So I just want to make sure everybody can hear me so well. Not the S word. Hey, Alex. Good to see you. We'll give everybody else a chance to get logged on. Hey, no worries. Good to see you, Galt for Prez. Hope everything's going well. Hey, Justin Johnson. Thank you for that. All right. Well, tonight we're going to be exploring old world connections in film. Hey, Quantum Paradox. Yeah, I hope everybody had a great Christmas as well. Hope you did too, and laying down under there, Jamie. So we're going to be exploring the old world connections in film, and there's a lot of old world connections in film. Now, when I started the channel, it's been almost, 11 months ago? Seems like it's a lot longer, or a lot shorter, depending on your perspective. I did some film connection reviews concerning their connections with the old world, and I've got to say, I had quite a visceral response from other people claiming to be alternative researchers. Now, these weren't any people who actually did alternative research channels or anything. They were just people who said that they were into alternative research, and they were telling me I should not be doing alternative research or old world connections in film. And I asked why, and the response I'd typically get is, well, the whole reason that, yeah, exactly. The whole reason that you can't do that kind of research is there's only 3 things that make up Tartaria or old world research, and that's Antiquitech, old photos, and looking at buildings. And I thought, okay, oh yeah, this all really happened. And so really those were the early days of the channel. And so I'd done several film reviews, and there was a lot of pushback on it. So yeah, exactly, Rebecca. They really had a good feeling about them. So, well, hey, Charlie, good to see you. And ultimately, that's what I did, and I moved on with them, and I've integrated them into reviews a little bit more. So I just always found it fascinating that there were people out there that were trying to tell me, yeah, exactly, what can you do and what can't you do? Hey, Illuminating Manuscripts, good to see you. Namaste to you as well. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through 5 films that I've selected, and we're just going to talk about some key moments and some of the connections that they have to the old world. And we're going to start with my personal favorite film. Hey, Cross-Threading, good to see you. Hey, Paul, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Exactly. And, and that's what I've tried to do and gone on with it. So anyways, the first film we're going to start with is Krull. And Krull is one of my favorite films. And I'll be honest, Krull was not well received when it came out in 1983. It was not a box office success by any means, and it's been a film that's been shunned by many, especially the mainstream. So naturally, you can guess that those are some indicators that there's probably some hints in this movie. Now, the interesting thing, oh, thanks, Many Fires. I appreciate that. The interesting thing about Krull, though, is that there are a lot of old world connections to it. And there's also the fact that there is a novel written by Alan Dean Foster, I think it was Alan Dean Foster, excuse me, that had even more old world connections. Now, we're looking at the opening scene here from Krull. Now, you see, this is the Black Fortress, and if you're not familiar with the plot of Krull, it's set on an alien world called Krull. Now, they never actually call it a planet. They just call it Krull. So, oh yeah, back in the day there. So, yeah, and a lot of people didn't watch it then, Quantum Paradox, and I'll be honest, I didn't watch it until it came out on VHS, not beta, VHS, so I'm dating myself, but, well, that's the idea. Anyways, so it didn't do well in the box office, but there's a lot of old world connections, starting with this opening scene. And in the film, they never call it a planet. They always call it a world. And this is the Black Fortress. And the single plot of Krull is that there's this evil entity called the Beast. He roams around in this Black Fortress, as it's called. It looks like a giant mountain, kind of looks like Shiprock in New Mexico. It bears a striking resemblance to it. So, yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing is, if you look at some of the issues that they had with the original script, they were trying to say that they had to alter the script for a variety of reasons. And at that time, you may or may not know, Krull was compared and lampooned because it was considered a Star Wars ripoff, because everything else was. Hey, Barrett, good to see you. So every movie, to include Battlestar Galactica, was compared to Star Wars because apparently, George Lucas had the handy greeting on space, as it were. So Krull is nothing about a space film. The opening scene shows the fortress flying through space, and then it lands on the planet. But there's a lot of how to do about the original script. Hey, Dukes, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. There was a lot of how to do about the original script that they were actually going to show the fortress flying from one great chasm to another, and they had to change it. Now, if you read the Alan Dean Foster novelization, you'll get that hint. And so I always found that interesting. Yeah, exactly. Good one with the Yellow Submarine reference. And that's kind of what they implied. Now, there's also several other little hints that Krull is not necessarily set in space, but they had to give that hint that, yes, it's kind of a space, a science fiction, fantasy combination. Oh, yeah. And I tend to agree with you, Aluminum Falcon, in several ways. So, but anyways, moving on. So they show the fortress landing on the planet, and it lands in very dramatic fashion, causing a crack. And oh, by the way, spoiler warnings. I'm going to talk the film all the way through and try to stay on topic as fast as I can and as well as I can. Can't promise to do perfect. So this is the Beast. And the Beast has a lot of different abilities and represents just as the name says. Is it supposed to be a bit of a devil representation? Yes. Is it supposed to be the great antagonist representation? Yes. And it's funny when you watch the Siskel and Ebert. Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate that. The Siskel and Ebert review of the film, they say, oh, yeah, what's it with the antagonist always losing? Yeah. But the interesting thing about the Beast, and you heard it in the intro, is that he had the ability to assume any form that he wished, that he had all kinds of powers, and that the whole film is based on a prophecy. A prophecy. Yeah, you got it, Rebecca. Not really hiding it. And yet it's in the opening dialogue when he says, don't let my form cause you fear. I can assume any form I wish. Hey, Sky Sage, good to see you. Welcome and thanks for joining us. So anyways, the whole aspect with the Beast, though, is that he has the plan to conquer. Now, they say the galaxy. Oh, yeah, that's always a good one. Although there are many different meanings to the galaxy, and really what they imply is that conquering different worlds. So that's what the plot's really revolved around, is the Beast going around conquering different worlds. Here's a close-up of his eye, and you've probably seen this before. And, not really any hint towards the symbolism here, or the symbology, as they'd say in the movie Boondock Saints. And then this is his army, the Slayers, and they're very unique. They're very alien, and yet they give out this really freakish scream when they get killed. And so, yeah, exactly. With the cat eyes, you're right. And the cat eyes are always present, even when the Beast assumes a different form. So, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Don. So, oh boy. Okay. Anyways, moving on. Yeah, exactly. And that's what it boils down to, reptilian shapeshifter. Hey, Sooner West, thanks for joining us. So hope everybody's getting logged in. So this is the army that works for the Beast, the Slayers. And the very first plot point of the movie is these two long-term rival kingdoms are going to forge an alliance to fight the invaders. And it's really interesting. They never call them aliens. They just call them invaders. It's kept generic in that way. And these are the two leads. Individual on the left is Prince Colwyn and Princess Lissa on the right. Now, it seems at first like it's the traditional royalty. They get married and then they're going to resist the beast. But there's a lot more of subtext in this movie that oftentimes gets overlooked. And the whole point of the movie, that in the very initiation point of the plot, yeah, exactly. The cat eyes are a major key to this. Yes, yes, that's the symbolism. You're absolutely right. Prince Colwyn, not Colin, Colwyn. But yes, I remember hearing that too when I first saw it. He said, no thanks, I'm already solar powered. Yeah, you're hitting to the plot there. But it all involves the ceremony, and the Beast and his army, the Slayers, raid the wedding and break it up, and they kidnap Princess Lissa. And then the rest of the plot involves the Beast trying to seduce Princess Lissa to marry him and fulfill the prophecy by marrying him, and then their son will rule the galaxy while Prince Colwyn attempts to rescue her. Now, on the surface, it seems like the classic plot. Yeah, indeed, we'll see. Well, and you know what? That's exactly what it could allude to. And I think they had to change a lot of different things in this movie. So, and you know, and to be honest, there's a lot of people who try to lampoon this movie. It's really interesting because if you look up modern reviews of it, they even still try to attack it to this day, which I find quite fascinating. It's like, why do they care about a movie that came out in 1983? That's 40 years ago. But you can find plenty of articles that say that this is a terrible movie. And naturally, for some inexplicable reason, J.J. Abrams is supposedly remaking it, even though it did not do well at the box office. So, you know, try to explain that. But along with the other explanations with this movie, you see that the Beast not only has the Slayers, he also has the Changelings. And the Changelings are very fascinating because they're another invader creature that can assume any form they wish, and you can always recognize them when they have their completely blacked out eyes. Ah, yes, exactly, Rebecca. And that's how it has to be, many fires, and it's always tucked in with fantasy or science fiction or what have you. And there's a very interesting scene where one of the changelings who is supposed to assassinate Prince Colwyn refuses to do so. And yeah, I tend to agree, Daryl. I mean, it has real scenes, real props in it, and they put a lot of effort into it. Yeah, it could be referring to that as well. And it's very, very frightening, some of the scenes in this film. Now, some people said, well, this was a kid's movie. It was rated PG at the time. They didn't have PG-13 yet. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom hadn't come out. Or no, wait, it was Red Dawn that led to the PG-13 rating. So, yeah. And you get all these obvious references in this film. I mean, it's loaded with all these references. And even though people try to say it's an unimaginative film, it's cliche, it's really not. And it's nothing like Star Wars. But you see these changeling characters and the ability that they have, and they very nearly end the plot rather quickly. They also kind of remind me of, I'm thinking of the Dune universe, and of course I'm talking about Frank Herbert's Dune universe, where you have, okay, I'm trying to remember here, what were they called? The Benny Tlilax, face dancers, that was it. Yeah, and I always think that the changelings remind me of the face dancers from Dune. So I know I'm geeking out a little bit on science fiction here, but I'm just explaining to you what I see in this film. And I think the changelings are another way that you can see creatures that aren't fully human, but try to act and look human. So a little bit of a trick right on there. Indeed. There you go, Kathy, the spice must flow. So anyway, what you see, though, is throughout the plot of the movie, I'll give a lot of credit to the character of Princess Lissa. She is not the traditional damsel in distress that they try to push on us. And in fact, she has one of the strongest moments of moral strength in the film, because while Prince Colwyn, who the Beast has taken the form of here, is trying to rescue Lissa off to the left here, the Beast is trying to tempt her. And one of his greatest temptations that he uses is he tells her, if you consent to be my queen, I'll stop the murdering and death of the Slayers inflicted on the land. And he makes it very clear that every hour she delays, more die. Think on it. And in probably one of the greatest moments of moral strength and courage, she resists this. And you can think of many examples where people will take what they think is the greater good, which is what the Beast is offering her, and she refuses. Hey, Songbird College Arts, good to see you. Oh yeah, and I agree, Alex. It was definitely not a kids movie. You know, I mean, it was a hard PG at the time. So, oh yeah, don't worry, we'll get to the Cyclops. He was a great character. So, ah, exactly. And you know, I think that's the whole thing is that she displays a lot of moral strength because if she concedes to be his queen, the movie's over. But she does not. She resists, and yet it's a very powerful point that he makes. Now, the other main thing that the film is remembered for is the glaive, which is the weapon Colwyn is wielding here. But what does the glaive actually represent? The glaive represents a means to an end because Yanar, who's the wise man, played wonderfully by Freddie Jones. Yeah, you're right, Sarah. That's a hard truth right there. None of them are really kids' movies, but remember, we grew up fast in the 80s. Kind of like Transformers, the animated film. It begins with a scene of genocide. But anyway, back to the glaive. The glaive is a means to an end. He has to prove himself worthy of the glaive, but the whole reason to have the glaive is so he can reach Princess Lissa. Yeah, thanks, Doc. I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Jerry. He does hint at it many times. So, yep, Freddie Jones was in Dune, and so was Francesca Annis, who played the Widow of the Web in Krull, and she's a wonderful performer. I always enjoyed her in any movie she was in. A lot of charisma and just an incredible performer. And yes, if you're going to ask me, I do prefer her version of Lady Jessica. And what I'm about to say is probably controversial, but I do prefer David Lynch's Dune to the new Dune. But that's just my opinion. If you like the new Dune, hey, all the more power to you. So anyway, the glaive is remembered though from Krull because it's yeah, exactly, where he has to climb a mountain to retrieve the glaive, and it's a very difficult quest where he has to have faith in himself. And I was speaking to a Prime Explorer a couple weeks ago about Krull, and one of the things they commented to me was how Prince Colwyn, despite the fact that his father was killed, his kingdom's pretty much destroyed, he maintains a pretty optimistic tone throughout the movie, which is definitely not what we see from heroes, especially in the 21st century. I mean, take the modern James Bond. The guy is always depressed about anything and everything. And maybe he has good reason to. So, well, thank you very much, Tori Hall. I appreciate that. And happy holidays to you. Yeah, I agree. And I wish David Lynch would have gotten to do the film that he wanted to do. It's a real tragedy, you know, and several science fiction writers and honest reviewers went out about that. But so anyway, he retrieves the glaive, and yet he's told he can't use the glaive until he actually has to use it to free Princess Lissa from the prison she's in. You can actually see it, and he has to cut through the wall with the glaive. So, but it's a very intriguing weapon. Now, here you have Yanar, who is the quote-unquote wise man, and this is the old love of his life, whose name is also Lissa, the same as the princess. And there's a very powerful scene where, because he left her to attend to his duties, oh, thanks, Justin, I really appreciate that. There's a very powerful scene where he left her to attend to his duties, and she had a baby, and then murdered it because she was angry with him. And yet, it's a very interesting scene in the movie where he instantly forgives her for doing this. And he's even able to see her how she looks when she's younger here. And she's played by Francesca Annis here. And it's only a short scene, but Francesca Annis always brings in a lot of screen charisma and presence. And seeing her with Freddie Jones, I mean, it's just something you don't see as much with performers. So, well, thanks, Many Fires. Yeah, go ahead and hit that like button. I appreciate that. Go ahead and hit that like button. So, but it's a very powerful scene. He forgives her, and then she's the one who actually helps him to see where the Black Fortress is going to be, because what happens is the Black Fortress moves every day when the twin suns go down and it goes to a new location. Great defense mechanism. Yep, Spider Witch, and there's a big spider that helps defend the entire web in the compound that she's in. So, oh yeah, thanks about that. I appreciate that, Quantum Paradox. I think I've heard about that. I've actually got a subsequent exploration, a live stream we're going to do on that. So. Oh, yeah. And he was a marvelous actor. So, nah, she made it pretty clear that she murdered him after he was born. But the whole point being is that it's instant forgiveness. And because of that forgiveness, she quickly enables him to know where the Black Fortress is going to be. And so I think that's really keen there, because what we see in this movie is the concept of working together, of not mistrusting people, and forgiveness. It's all in this film, even though it's considered a cheesy fantasy film. Now, Colwyn recruits a group of mercenaries, if you will. They're robbers. Well, they tried to, they didn't market it as a child's movie, Celeste, but it was rated PG and some people saw it as a child's movie. So, but yeah, it's the interesting aspect about it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Antonio. The glaive was a reminder of simpler times. So, oh, there you go. That's right. Liam Neeson. And there, Robbie Coltrane. This was an early movie for him. Liam Neeson was in this movie. I mean, really, you had a bunch of heavy hitters in terms of performers that were in this movie. I mean, Ken Marshall, unfortunately, his career didn't go anywhere, but he did show up on Deep Space Nine as Lieutenant Commander Eddington, and he played the role very well. So, but you have really everything that's expressed, and at the same time, people are still human beings and act like human beings. And I think it's imperative that what you see in the hero of Colwyn and the Princess Lissa, is that both of them maintain their optimistic outlooks despite so many things working against them. So, well, thanks, Hendo. I really appreciate that. And that's all good. Show up whenever. So it's good to see you. But in any event, moving on. He finds out, though, that the glaive is not enough to defeat the beast. And what he finds out is that he actually has to... Oh, yeah, it is. And like I said, it does bear a striking resemblance to Shiprock in New Mexico, which is, I'm sure, just another coincidence. But anyway, we won't go into that. But he's unable to defeat the beast with the glaive, and so he has to complete the ceremony with Lissa, where he says, it's not me you can't defeat, it's us. And so they're able to join their forces, join their power, and suddenly it gives him the ability to shoot flames from his hand. I mean, that's all it is. He shoots flames from his hand, and that's by completing the ceremony. Oh, yeah, and it's a very interesting structure that you have out there, that's for sure. But you think about that. You think about they use magic, but then they also use the trust and love in each other that they have. And yeah, it sounds a little corny, but that's exactly what the plot's around, because there are numerous times where both of them have the chance to undermine each other. And you have to remember, they had only just met at the start of the movie, but they remained faithful to each other. She remained faithful to him, and he remained faithful to her. And I think that's really the key point to the movie. And even in the end, Yanaar remains faithful to the Widow of the Web, the original Lissa, and then ultimately she restores her faith in him. And that's really the point of the movie, and that's a theme that you don't see in movies these days. Not so much. I mean, they're there in some movies. You'll see them, but it seems to be something that for whatever reason suppressed. I can't imagine why. So that's really one of the big points of Krull. And here's the epic scene where he battles with fire. Now, unfortunately, I feel bad. I did not include pictures of Ergo the Magnificent, the Conjurer, or the Cyclops. The Cyclops is a very interesting character because he's supposedly from an alien world, but how does he get to Krull if the Black Fortress is the only way to move between worlds? And if there's rumors that in the original script, there was actually teleportation that was going to be involved as well. But they thought that was a little too fantasy, and they wanted to make it a little bit more science fiction because, remember, Star Wars, it's the early 80s, and everything was Star Wars. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pretty much, Robert, and that's what a lot of people saw. You know, it's either Star Wars or it's not. So... And the Cyclops is an intriguing character, and he was played by a resilient British performer, Bernard Bresslaw, and did a really good job with it. So, but that's pretty much it for Krull, and it's definitely a film that I can recommend. Oh, yeah. And Ergo adds a lot to the film. You know, he shows the person who maintains a lot of his child innocence, and in fact, he even connects with the kid that they pick up, Titch. And no, it's not an annoying kid, which was another trope that you saw in a lot of 80s films. So, oh yeah. Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right, Jerry. That's a great call out. And he even incorporates that in the story with The Sleeper Must Awaken. So, oh yeah. Oh, what a surprise. What a surprise. All right, so we'll move on to Logan's Run, 1976. Oh yeah, Spaceballs is a great one. Logan's Run, the 1976 science fiction movie, which depicts a society in a dome where life is utopia until you reach the age of 30, and then you have to report to Carousel. And everyone believes that if they can make it past Carousel, that they will be renewed and start life over again. And that's the premise of the plot. Now, interestingly enough, it's based on a book, which was a lot different. Oh, yeah. So it stars Michael York, Jenny Agutter, Richard Jordan. and our good old favorite Peter Ustinov. Yeah, we won't say so much about Peter Ustinov. He performed well in this movie. Let's just leave it at that. Good one, Quantum Paradox. Yeah, the 80s was when I saw it too, even though it came out in 76. So, and you know, Logan's Run is a wonderful movie, and it's an interesting open movie. They had some good open science fiction movies, and it did come out a year before the original Star Wars. So make of that what you will. Anyway, here's a scene depicting Carousel. So everybody has a life clock that's imprinted in their hand, and when the life clock starts shining red, and this shows you how they try to impose time upon controlling our lives, which is a recurring theme in films, they report to Carousel. They start spinning, they fly up, and they believe that if they reach the ceiling, they're going to survive, but they have lasers that are blasting them, and naturally nobody ever survives. But of course they think, yes, they're going to survive if they just reach the top. Oh yes, that it was. Anyways, what happens is Logan, who's a policeman, or a Sandman as they call him. Now that's a reference from the book because people were put to sleep, but in the movie they just shoot other people. And Logan's assigned with the mission of finding all these people who are runners. These are people who don't submit to Carousel and try to run and survive. Oh yeah. And she also had a cameo in Darkman too. I remember that. Yeah, she's a very, very interesting performer as well. Those great performers from the United Kingdom. Anyways, oh yeah, Farrah Fawcett was in the movie too. Holly 13, I believe that was her character. Yeah, she was at the the new face that he tries to get. But in any event, Logan is assigned the mission of terminating all these runners who've somehow escaped. Yeah, exactly. Very good point there, Rebecca. Isn't it funny how that 30 magic number keeps coming up? You know, 30-year loan. Anybody with me? Oh, yes. Don't worry, Daryl. We're going to get to Richard Jordan here in a second. So anyway, the interesting thing about this movie is they're in this domed city, and he breaks out of the domed city to find this place called Sanctuary, but it turns out that it's really the ruined remnants of our civilization, the Fifth Era civilization. And they see what's left of it. Here's one of the scenes where the people reporting to Carousel show their flashing life clock, and that's what they call the crystal implanted in their hand. It's the life clock. Now, Richard Jordan, who's a wonderful actor and played Logan's best friend, Francis. Francis 7, Logan 5. Drawing a blank here. Francis 7. Yeah, okay. Just making sure I got the numbers right. And no, wait, it was, Logan 5, Jessica 6, Francis 7. I think I'm on there. Anybody correct me, okay? The numbers sometimes zap me a little bit. Oh, yeah. Duncan and Dune. That's right. Way before the modern Dune. Although I got to admit, when Jason Momoa died in the current Dune, I thought, dang, there goes all the character in the film. Okay, sorry. Yeah, good point there, Pete. And isn't it funny how it's right there, isn't it? Well, and maybe that's the real trick behind it. So, but what's interesting about Francis, the character portrayed by Richard Jordan in Logan's Run, is that he sees all the same things that Logan does. So Logan eventually wakes up to the fact that they're living a controlled life, that a computer runs their entire life, and ultimately comes to the conclusion they don't have to die when they reach the age of 30. But Francis can't reach those conclusions. He's just been indoctrinated too long. He can't make that leap of faith to where he's no longer the person who doesn't have to live to be 30. In fact, in the end, when he looks at Logan's life clock and sees that it's empty. Yeah, exactly. You're right, Celeste. When he looks at Logan's life clock and sees that it's empty, he honestly thinks Logan renewed. So Francis can't ever jump free of the system, and it's a real tragedy with his character. And in fact, he ends up dying when Logan has to clock him over the head numerous times with a flagpole in self-defense when they fight it out in the U.S. Capitol of all places. What's that there, Robert? Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very direct, though, especially with Francis's character played by Richard Jordan. Hey, Scotty, good to see ya. Hope everything is going well. Yeah, you're right, Sky Sage. It is cognitive dissonance. And that's really what you see from Francis. I mean, he means well. He cares about Logan right up until the end, but he just can't free himself of that system. You know, and earlier in the film, you see their friendship, and the film does a pretty good job. It's very efficient about doing world building and laying out the character relationships very quickly. But as the film goes on, you see that Francis can't understand what's going on and he doesn't reach those logical conclusions. And ultimately it leads to his downfall and ultimate death, because if he just would have joined with Logan, he would have found out he didn't have to die at the age of 30. Hey, Radioactive, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So a lot of tragedy in the film Logan's Run. And I think it's added to the fact that, and oh, here's another interesting thing. So no one's supposed to be over 30, but Richard Jordan was in his late 30s. So yeah, I wish I would have looked that good when I was in my late 30s, but oh well. yeah, you definitely can. Yeah, the BioShock games. Good call out there, Jory. I should have played those a little bit more back in the day. Oh, good one, Jamie. Skivvy boys. Okay there, Dr. Maniac Vaughn's Truth. Yeah, maybe. Oh, yes. And, you know, it's funny you bring up the ice robot, Daryl, because they still try to revolve controversy around the gentleman who voiced the ice robot. So, but they were trying to do that a lot of times with certain characters who did that. And because it happened twice, you know, they always say, oh, there's a lot of controversy with it, which wasn't the case. So anyway. So here's some of the imagery. You can actually see they did a good job with the matte paintings, and I kind of miss those special effects. So, oh, Logan's Run, you haven't seen it? Yeah, it's a good one. Don't get me started on Ice Pirates. Okay, we might have to do that a subsequent time, but yeah, it's another favorite movie of mine. Robert Urich, quite a comedy. Good to see you, Jason. Thanks for joining us. But then, of course, what's funny is they see the Lincoln Memorial, Logan and Jessica do, and they go up on it and they see the statue of Lincoln and they say, that must be what it's like to be old. Well, what are the odds on that there? Hopefully it was a good theater. I noticed that theaters seemed to be a little different back then. Yeah, it might be there, Bug Garden. It might be. Oh, yeah. Well, that's John Carpenter again. Yeah, we've covered his films. I've done a lot of looks at John Carpenter films. They're wonderful. So, oh yeah, Jamie, it's a crazy film, but it's a lot of fun. You know, that old saying, it's legitimately a fun film. All right, so now we move on to Zardoz. Zardoz, our 1970s film from British director John Boorman. Now, this film was done after John Boorman had success with Deliverance, and this was basically the studio rewarding John Boorman for his great work, and they basically gave him, I think it was $1 million, and said, go make whatever movie you want to. Yeah, that's right. Write it about whatever you want. Now, Zardoz is very interesting. Yeah, that's probably why, Sarah. No doubt about it. Well, you know, it's funny breaking free from narcissism. The ideas in Zardoz, while it might seem like a silly, incomprehensible film, there are some very frightening ideas. You know what? And you're absolutely right. Zardoz is a tough watch. So I'll just warn anybody on that. If you think you're going to jump into Zardoz, it is not an easy film to watch. Yeah, isn't it interesting, Daryl? I actually got 2 John Boorman movies here in these 5. So yeah, we'll get to Excalibur. Don't worry. But the whole premise of Zardoz is it's set in the post-apocalyptic world. There's a group of people called the Eternals. They live in the vortex, and they're the scientists in their ilk. And then everybody else who lives outside the vortex, yeah, exactly, they're called the Brutals, and they live in squalor, and then they serve the Eternals. Until one time, a quick-witted Brutal, played by Sean Connery, of course, named Zed, he gains some knowledge and power by manipulation, as it's made clear, and decides to infiltrate the vortex to bring down the Eternals' reign of power. Now, this is a real powerful scene here because, oh, thanks, Rebecca. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Well, you know what, Jerry? I'm going to cover Time Bandits in a subsequent live stream because that is an incredible movie. Can never get enough David Warner. Yes, actually, they do say that, Daryl, right before this scene where the giant head spews out weapons and ammunition because the Brutals are supposed to maintain population control. So, oh yeah. Yeah, John Carter. That's a good one too. That's a good one too. So, well, thank you very much, Carl. I appreciate that. So anyway, it's basically a take on Wizard of Oz. And in fact, that's the solution to the plot, is that Wizard of Oz is the book that the Eternal named Arthur Frayne is using to manipulate everybody. Oh yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Rebecca. It's good to see other people getting on board and able to enjoy the special content. So, but, oh, Had Metrpololis that slipped in there. Sorry about that. We'll come back to Metrpololis in time. This is Arthur Frayne, and he's the individual who manipulates everything. He's basically the Wizard of Oz in the story of Zardoz, and that's really what it's a play on. Yeah, I think John Carter got a raw deal, and it's sad that Disney gave up on that because that was a good film. It was actually a really good film, but that's what we got right now. So, yep, and that's exactly what this film shows. So Arthur Frayne. Anyway, when Zed infiltrates Vortex, they quickly torture him psychologically and discover what he's all about. And the entire premise of the film, and it's really weird. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. I mean, yeah, L. Frank Baum did write 16 Oz books, and he also did The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, which oddly enough includes a lot of references to that place we like to talk about, Tartaria. Don't say it. Don't say it. I just said it. What are you going to do about it? So anyway, the film is somewhat incomprehensible. There is this plot point, though, where the Eternals have been left in a state of catatonia. And here you have Sean Connery tossing them aside. And this is symbolic for a variety of reasons, because it shows that these people have no life. They've willingly given up their life. They have no motivation, no presence. And it's one of the key themes of the movie. And so I know this seems a little comical, but this is just how people regard these people who have no life. They have legitimately given up their lives, and this is how Sean Connery feels about them. I know it seems a little comical, but it's very symbolic in the film for a reason. And so as the film goes on, what Sean Connery figures out is that the Eternals, who are pictured here off to the right, and he's looking into the artificial intelligence, which just happens to be called, anybody know what it's called? The Tabernacle. That's the artificial intelligence. Oh, yeah. That's the artificial intelligence that's really controlling the vortex. But the movie doesn't tell you who's really behind everything. It alludes to it, but it doesn't spell it out for you. And so what they find out is they have to break free from the control of the tabernacle. Some of the Eternals want to start a new life, such as May here. She's a philosopher, and she's able to accept a different way of being and moves on to a new life. But other Eternals, such as Friend here, they just want to die because they're so tired of being alive. That's what it all comes down to. So yeah, it's a bit of a dystopian film at the same time. And the whole film details... Yeah, well, that's what happens when you give John Borman all the money and creative control. He's going to do exactly what he wants, and boy, did he ever. So, and yeah, thank you again for that. So, and we talk about what is an NPC. Is it somebody to be mocked? Is it just because there's some people, they're like Francis, they're good people at heart, but they just can't make that leap? I'm not really sure. I don't know. And I'm not going to come to that answer tonight, but it is very clearly depicted in numerous films. Whether it's somebody who has deep character like Francis did, or these catatonics that are depicted in Zardoz. So it's hard to say. But the whole premise of the movie is that Sean Connery finds a way to break the control of the AI. Yeah. He finds a way to break control of the AI, and eventually they lead a revolt. Hey, Heidi, good to see you. Well, and, there's other kinds of movies. They've kind of been changed a little bit, movies that don't have deeper context. And, we can dance around it, but a lot of movies with deeper context have been removed. Well, we just have our action scene and run to the next one, please. So NPC is non-player character. It's a term that came up, about 3 years ago when something was happening in 2020. I don't know what. And it really referred to anybody who didn't seem to have their own personality, or really the best way to say it is have self-agency. Now, there's been a lot of studies on it, and there's been other alternative researchers. Hey, Dwayne, I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's another way to say it. They're breaking free from narcissism. Yep. It's really people who don't have depth, and they just go to one reaction to the next. They need to be told what to think and what to do. Or they're people that the Gnostics used to call people who were only materialists. So, yeah, there you go. That's a good way to put it, Sky Sage. Well, no, not exactly. So it's all good. But the thing about Zardoz is when it ends, the way it ends is the vortex is destroyed. Most of the Eternals are killed. Some of them are able to make a leap to a new life. And I have reviewed the movie, and you can certainly watch it. Well, thank you, Sadie. I appreciate that. I have made the review of Zardoz, and I can recommend the review, but I give you a warning in the review that be careful watching the movie, especially on your own, because in simple terms, it is a very trippy movie, and it is not an easy movie to watch. You know, I'd say Krull is easy to watch. It might seem a little corny in places, but it's easy to watch. Hey, PJCC West, good to see you. And Logan's Run is a pretty easy watch, you know, and technically, which of those three is the best movie? Well, Krull is Lucius Aurelian's favorite movie, along with Excalibur, but any one of these movies I can watch on any given night, but that's just me, you know, that's just me. Okay, so let's go to Metrpololis. Oh, yeah, exactly. So Metrpololis, what have we got here? Yeah, it was, you know, Harry Potter's a good example, especially the original books. So, oh yeah, and Excalibur is the last movie we're covering, but we'll go to Metrpololis. So 1927 German science fiction movie, considered one of the original science fiction movies that depicts a dystopian society where you have a group of people who run a city, managers, and then you have workers, and that old divide. Yeah, that's what some people would say. But anyway, they depict Moloch here, and Moloch is supposed to represent the heart machine in the movie. And Metrpololis is really just that. It's a very advanced futuristic city that's kept alive by people working very hard and people exploiting those workers. Now you have the people who run the city, and they live in opulence. And you see a lot of old world architecture that's somehow depicted when it was very difficult to do so. Remember, these were all practical effects and actual sets. So, oh yeah, exactly. And maybe that's what they were depicting to an extent. Yep. And I think a lot of people, oh, thanks, Jerry. I appreciate that. I think a lot of people see this film a little differently now. You know, a lot of people see it as the original science fiction film, but there's a lot more to it. Oh, yeah. And in fact, they even reference the Tower of Babel. In fact, the Tower of Babel is the leader of the city's headquarters. In fact, here it is referenced in this scene. So you have a lot of different aspects in the scene, some very unique depictions. This is Maria. And what's really intriguing, and I'll zoom in on this for you here, is some of the work they do with the eyes. Yeah, absolutely right. Both of you, yeah, good comments there, Sky Sage and Rebecca. Controlled society, no free thoughts allowed, and there is a lot of Art Deco. And in fact, it's kind of the motivation for Art Deco. So there you go, many fires. Yep, it all overlaps. Well, you can watch Metrpololis for free. I believe it's still up on YouTube. So, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure how they achieve this scene with these eyes, but it's a very disturbing scene where it shows you a lot of the conflicted personalities of the people in this movie. Some people even go so far as to suggest that this film really is from a different civilization. Now, I don't know about that, but in any event. But it also shows one of the first androids or bots, if you will, in a film. And it was obviously the motivation for Star Wars. So, oh yeah, Rachel and Blade Runner. Yeah, not covering Blade Runner this time, but we'll definitely talk about it in a subsequent live stream. So, oh yeah, steampunk Photoshop. But what's interesting is the conflict between the, oh, that's another good way. That's another good way to say it there, Chris Johnson. No inner dialogue. No bicameral mind, as they said in that show Westworld before it strangely changed between the first and the second season. So, but back to Metrpololis, and it shows you droids. It shows this conflict between the managers of the city and the people who run the city. They even have Maria, whose essence is transformed to this robot, and then this robot is actually a fake Maria who begins many revolts and violence throughout the city. So a lot of different interesting ideas. Here's a depiction of Fredder's headquarters, the Tower of Babel. And here's where you see the Art Deco that Rebecca mentioned earlier. Oh yeah, Photoshop of horrors. That's absolutely right. And then here's the character Maria. And again, I'll zoom in on the eyes for you because it's really intriguing how they did these shots with the eyes. And keep in mind, this is the 1920s. Very odd facial expressions. So a lot of interesting things in this movie. And I certainly recommend it just for understanding the historical aspect of cinema, or at least as we understand it. So yes, Head Honcho Rocks. I'm familiar with that because there's actually a mountain there called the Tower of Babel. And they say it's where a rock struck, and that's why it's so circular. Oh yeah. A lot of unique things in this film. And then it all culminates at this, what is supposed to be a set piece, but it looks like a giant cathedral where the workers and the managers finally meet. And then the son of the head manager, he finally acts as the heart who unifies the workers and the management. That's really the plot in a nutshell. But there's a lot more going on in the film. And when you watch it, it's certainly a lot of meaning for you to derive because, there's no dialogue. It's only shown in cards, and a lot of it's through imagery and through facial expressions. And it's really impressive how much of a story they convey. Doesn't it though? Doesn't it? It just needs to have that white painting on it. Oh yeah, it's probably on the inside. So anyway, well, yeah, you always got to have giant doors. How are you going to know it's a cathedral without giant doors? Hey, Isabella, good to see you. Welcome. Yeah, exactly. English Socialist Party, 1984. Oh yeah. This is an idealized image of it. This isn't actually from the film, but this is a unique artwork that's associated with the film that gives you an idea of the futuristic aspect. Yeah, who knows? We might be. We just might be and not know it. Oh yeah, newspeak, double talk, double think. It's all in there. All right. And then one of the most important points is the concept of time in the film Metrpololis. So up top, the management or the rulers of the city run on a normal 24-hour clock. There are 2 shifts that work underground, and they operate on a 10-hour clock. But what they don't realize is that 10 hours is actually 12 hours. And so it shows how people are letting time control their lives. In fact, do we allow time to control our lives? And that's really what this film causes you to question, because some people have suggested, was there a world where there was a 10-hour clock? Well, actually, the question you should be asking is there a world where there can be any kind of clock? And any sort of clock can designate any sort of time at any point in time. Oh, yeah, exactly. And so when it hit 10 hours, the workers thought they were getting a good deal. Oh, I'm only working a 10-hour shift. In reality, they were working a 12-hour shift, and there were only 2 shifts. Oh, yeah, I'll have to check that out. So, yeah, that could be. That could be. And Matt's got some wonderful theories, and I've certainly watched Quantum of Conscience. So, yeah, exactly. Ding, ding, ding. And you're all onto it. And that's what this film very clearly shows, is that time is an artificial control feature that's imposed on people. Maybe. We just don't know. But there's always the whole concept of time and why we always talk about things. All right, so that's enough of Metrpololis. I want to save the most time for what is my favorite film with Krull. And you're going to say, oh, really? And how can you have 2 favorite films? Well, believe me, when you watch Excalibur, please do a video on what? Yeah, just let me know. On time? Sure. Got one coming up. Oh, yeah. Excalibur. Yep. 1981 by John Borman, the same director as Zardoz, and yet Excalibur is a completely different film. And in fact, you could think about Excalibur representing the last remnant of the previous civilization, and I do think it goes that far. And Excalibur blew me away when it came out as well, because I think this has and always will be the best movie on the King Arthur legend, and it depicts everything very wonderfully. And here you have good old Liam Neeson, who was in Krull, along with the unbelievably wonderful performer Helen Mirren. And this is an early film for her. And she is incredible in this movie. She plays Morgana, King Arthur's half-sister. She's the antagonist of the movie, but yet she's also a sympathetic antagonist. So there's a lot of aspects to this movie and a lot of different elements to it. And it follows the Arthurian legend very well. You start off with King Uther, played by a very young Gabriel Byrne, and he does a pretty good job, although there was a joke about how he was saying one night with Igraine. And for me, this was really my introduction to the Arthurian legend. Exactly. The land and the king are one. And that's one of the central aspects to it. It's one of the central themes of the movie, and it's what the king actually forgets, and he has to be brought out. Ah, yes. Could be true, Doc Ride. It could be true, and maybe we are. So here is the wedding ceremony is a very beautiful scene, and they shot this film in Ireland, and so you might have noticed that I do have a bit of a connection with Ireland. So yeah, that's part of it. That's what's depicted in the film. I mean, this film does not shy away from depicting darkness and deceit and all the worst aspects of humanity while at the same time depicting the best aspects of humanity. Well, this was filmed in 1980 and it came out in 1981. Yeah, they did a great combination of some of the original old marches from Wagner, and then they had some Carl Orff in it. Carl Orff's theme actually is the King Arthur theme. It's a wonderful film. I highly recommend it just as a film alone. And then visually, it's very beautiful. But you see how the land and the civilization progresses from these very rough-looking knights when the film starts. And as the movie progresses, you gradually see civilization start to form, and then it falls apart again. So here you have Helen Mirren as Morgana with Nicole Williamson, a wonderful British actor, as Merlin. Now, a lot of people remember Sam Neill as Merlin, and I had a saying, Sam Neill did a wonderful job of portraying Merlin, but Nicole Williamson was Merlin. Oh, yeah. Well, not to give you a cliche answer, Head Honcho rocks, but that is a story for another day. So, yeah, there's a little bit different then. So, yep, many, many faces. You're right. Yeah, and I haven't forgotten it at all. Has Charlie Borman, and it also has Robert Addy. We'll get to him in a little bit. But there's this powerful scene where Arthur has just drawn the sword from the stone and he has to fight some of the other knights. And he has one of the significant battle lords, Sir Uriens, and he has to trust Sir Uriens to knight him because Arthur hasn't been knighted yet. It's a very powerful scene of faith and understanding and forgiveness in the movie. And it's really where you start to see the civilization take off in this film because he has to spare Uriens to do it. You also have Nicole Williamson as Merlin, and I love how they depict the Standing Stones, and we had a special exploration on that. So, oh yeah. Well, there is hope for all of us, and that's why we have to keep moving. Oh, okay, New World Over. Yeah, don't worry, it's on the list, so. Come on, Rebecca. If I tell you that, that's going to answer way too many questions. So, well, I'll give you a hint. Saw it in the theater, and did not see it in the United Kingdom. So, yeah, that's right. Another Dune connection there. Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart played Sir Leondegrance, who was Guinevere's father. Yeah, I know you're very crafty, and I respect that. So, anyways, back to Excalibur. Here's the powerful scene where Sir Uriens, he's given the sword by Arthur, and he could simply kill him, but he doesn't. He actually knights him because he's touched by Arthur's display of faith and confidence in him to respect him as a warrior. And so you get that whole concept. Oh, don't worry, it's coming. You get that whole concept of what people were like in an older civilization. I think it's honestly depicted in this film, how there was a code of honor. Now, Sir Uriens, despite being Arthur's greatest antagonist, he's actually the one who's willing to die for him. Here you have Morgana. Now, Morgana is a very conflicted character because she does have a righteous cause in the fact that Arthur's father did murder her father. And so she has a bit of a revenge streak for that. But she's written in a much more complicated way, in the way Helen Mirren portrays her. It's really wonderful. This is her son from incest with Arthur, because Arthur was her half brother, and this is Mordred, who's played by Robert Addy. For those of you who don't know, I'm a big fan of Robin of Sherwood, and Robert Addy plays Guy of Gisborne. Yeah, that's right. Gold armor, which the only weapon that can penetrate it is Excalibur. And here's that knighting scene again. And this is one of my favorite scenes. And I think the fact that he actually does that, it really shows the trust and faith and confidence. Yep, that's exactly right. He draws the sword twice, but doesn't become king until he shows faith in others, which I think is a really powerful moment in the movie. And that's why the scene is so powerful. Exactly. The actual concept of a code of honor, not just something that's fancy or for show, but people who really have honor and respect in others. Something that we're constantly taking away from each other. Hey, Jacob Law, good to see you. I don't wonder if it was Hendo, especially the Robin of Sherwood version of it, because there's lots of clues on that. So that might be a subsequent exploration if somebody requests it. So we also have one of the best scenes of the quest for the Grail, which really Percival becomes the main character. What's interesting about this movie is it's divided up into 3 acts, like really good movies are. And you have this, yeah, I agree, Scotty. you have a main character in each section of the movie. In the first section of the movie, it's Uther Pendragon. In the middle section of the movie, it's Arthur. And then in the last section of the movie, Percival becomes the main character, and then reverting back to Arthur, although Percival is the one who finishes out the movie. It's all very intriguing. Exactly, Doc Rod. I completely agree with you. And I think that's why it's important that we remember that no matter what. But the Grail quest by Percival is quite an intriguing portion of the movie, and really the entire tone of the film shifts because it goes from depicting this near utopia that they have with Camelot and the way the land is balanced and people are living in full respect of each other. All the subjects have everything that they want and need. And Arthur even suggests that they've defeated evil, but they haven't. And that's when, because of the issue with Guinevere, because Arthur has to be someone who's more than a man. He has to be the stuff of future legends. He can't be the perfect husband for her, or he can't be a good husband for her, and even admits it. And so she makes the mistake of having an affair with Lancelot. And Lancelot and Guinevere aren't evil characters. They're not evil human beings. They make mistakes, as human beings legitimately do. And that's what this film depicts. The quest for the Grail is being able to forgive people for their mistakes. Oh, yeah, that Kevin Costner guy. Yeah, I was wondering when you're going to bring him up. But I always found the Grail quest in Excalibur to be one of the best depictions of it. And even the end scene. Yeah, exactly. Because oftentimes they don't want us to forgive. Yeah, you're exactly right, Many Fires. And he admits that to Guinevere and comes very clean and forgives her. You know, another scene of good forgiveness and understanding I made mistakes, you made mistakes. But that's what it all boils down to. Yeah, true. True. Yep, the boat taking him off to Avalon. Good to see you, Katie. Welcome. But some other notes from this film. So Percival is really the stalwart knight who helps Arthur all the way through the end in the final battle against Mordred and his army. Now, I'd like to give a shout out to Nicholas Clay as Lancelot. There have been a lot of depictions as Lancelot, and for whatever reason, oh yeah. And the Green Knight's a great story, Sky Sage, and it's great Arthurian myth as well. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah, it is, Daryl, because I think it shows the opposite inverse of the Grail story. Just a bunch of people who are clowning around, not really sure what they're doing, and just bumbling into one misadventure after another. Because, yeah, that's what the quest for the Grail can be. It can be very serious, and it can be a massacre, and it can be a comedy all at the same time. Absolutely right, Robert. And the reason I like Nicholas Clay's depiction of Lancelot is he manages to come across as being the perfect knight in tactical capability, but he has human flaws. And even in the end, when he says, "It's the old wound, my king, it never healed." And ultimately, that's what kills him. Yeah, so my favorite version, since y'all are talking about the Green Knight, is the 1990s version that came directly from British television. And it was not a main release movie. I'll have to post it on my channel. I'll put it up on Reddit because I strongly recommend it. So, oh yeah, John Cleese. So, it may be an ideal. In this film, in Excalibur, it's depicted as that which gives us a fresh start and enables us to begin our lives anew and actually conduct the proper quest, because it's not until Arthur is healed by the Grail that he's able to continue to be the king. And really what it's about is remembering that the land and the people are one. Specifically, the king and the land are one. And so that's what it all boils down to. Now, a little depiction here. This was a screen production of the film. The women who were depicted in the movie Excalibur. So you have Guinevere on the left, you have Morgana in the middle, and you have Igraine on the right. You see some very interesting characteristics, and they all have very well-developed characters. And even though Igraine's not in the film very long, portrayed by Katrine Borman, John Borman's daughter, they called it the Borman Family Project because he had a lot of his family involved in the film. You kind of see the different dimensions to their characters and how people respond different ways. And I always thought that the depth that these characters had made them very interesting. They were all strong in their own way, and they all had their very unique personalities. And each of them made different mistakes, and yet at the same time, I like the depth that they have. And oftentimes it's something that we just don't see in movies to this day. And so I appreciate that in the movie Excalibur and what they all brought to this film. I also like the depiction in the sets. I think this is probably one of the best depictions that we've ever seen of the Round Table. Whenever I think of the Round Table, Excalibur, Camelot, I see this. The interior depiction. So, yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. All good references. Absolutely. Yeah, I would certainly, I wonder what happened with the set, because this was an incredible set and it really transported you there. And Nicole Williamson, his portrayal of Merlin, I think you could be onto something there, Rebecca. And certainly Nicole Williamson's little device that he used here that always lit up whenever he was chanting an incantation or a spell. Yeah, pass the salt. So, but the interesting thing is Nicole Williamson and Helen Mirren had a bit of a falling out before the film, and they actually made it as part of their characters. And they did a really good job, because you saw this little bit of contest going on between the two of them. And so I thought it was really depicted well in the film. So, yep, that was the dragon, the referred to dragon in the film. Now, granted, that was just a set photo, but yeah. And I certainly agree. He was the best Merlin. And it's interesting because Nicole Williamson actually played Little John in the Robin Hood movie with Sean Connery when he played Robin Hood. Exactly. And you see it reflected relentlessly. Oh, yeah. It's always a wonderful film to rewatch. One of the most powerful scenes in the entire movie, though, is, and I play it at the start of many of the videos, is after Arthur is renewed by the Holy Grail, and he says, "Ready, my knights, for battle. They'll ride with their king once more." And then you see them ride out, and the land is renewed as they're riding through, and they're playing Karl Orff. It's a wonderful scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in a movie ever. And they're going out to face Mordred's army, who vastly outnumbers them. He only has about 20 knights left. And John Boorman obviously did not have the budget to shoot a large-scale battle, but he managed to make it look like a large-scale battle. Yeah, in a manner of speaking, he was flawed, Katie. He was supposed to be flawed, because he had to earn his true path to ascend to Avalon. That's what the story's about. Because oftentimes we try to depict people as being perfect in films today, but nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. That's one of the reasons that I think that we go through our trials and tribulations. The battle finally ends, and he slays Mordred, played by Robert Addy, by running him through with Excalibur. And that is how the movie ends. Hey, thank you, my bailiwick zone. I appreciate that. Yep, made him ride faster, and then they had the final battle with the fog, and yet the fog was also a major plot point where Merlin went and tricked Morgana into releasing the fog after Morgana tricked Merlin into imprisoning himself. So, yep, it is a very spiritual film. Ah, absolutely, PJCC West. When we embrace our own nature and we believe in ourselves. Absolutely. Yeah, silver and gold. Very good point. So a lot of symbolism in this movie, and it reflects everything that comes down to Excalibur. So let's go back and recap some of the themes that we've seen through all these 5 films. You know what? Since you're bringing it up, one of my favorite scenes also is compare and contrast how Uther and Arthur related with Merlin. Uther really couldn't stand Merlin and kind of ordered him around and didn't really care about him. When Merlin says, "This world's done with me," and he's leaving, Arthur is very, very sad and gives him a hug. It's a really touching scene. Ah, yes, Sky Sage. Absolutely. You know, if you come to it, yeah, it's very obviously depicted. So we all have things we can work on, Kevin. We all have things we can work on. There's no doubt about it. Oh, yeah. Well, hey, thanks, Sooner West. I appreciate that. And everybody be sure to hit that like button. Thank you very much. And you know what? It's amazing how fast this year has been going by. And I'm a little shocked at how quickly it went by. And it doesn't seem like it was that long ago that I was doing these film reviews, much to the chagrin of many people who were telling me this has nothing to do with the old world or Tartaria. Really? Excalibur has nothing to do with it? Oh, yeah. Wonderful people here, you know, and that's what I love about the channel is all of you are wonderful people. You all have wonderful ideas, and I appreciate every one of them. So he does and he doesn't. It's very interesting. And what's really crazy is that John Boorman's career kind of petered out after this. This is really the last big film he did. I mean, he had other films, The Emerald Forest, which also had Charlie Boorman in it. That was intriguing. Another early film for Powers Booth, but yeah, we'll see. We shall see. But some other connections, the faceless evil that you see, because what's interesting about these movies, you know, we have AI, we have a computer, we have a beast, we have darker forces, because what's interesting about Excalibur is it alludes to the darker forces, but if you ever read the novel, Morgana is not the ultimate evil in the movie. She simply becomes a tool of it. So it's all very, very intriguing. Yeah, The Emerald Forest is a good movie. Don't let me talk it down or anything like that. It just seemed like John Boorman's career just didn't continue as people or certain directors who tell the truth, like John Carpenter. So yeah, and that may be what it reflects in, and that's what you see in these films, and that's why I picked these films to review and cover for this. So. But in any event, probably the reason why Krull is my favorite film, maybe because Krull transports me to a different time and different place. And I often imagine that movie as being set in a different land, but a land that we can somehow access. Now, you know, maybe I'm out of my mind or whatever, and that's fine if you want to think that. You know, it's not going to hurt my feelings. But it's one of those movies that really transports me to a different place. But when it comes to the movie that does the best job from start to finish of really depicting all allusions to the old world and what that civilization may have been like, especially in a society, I think Excalibur covers it the best. You have what things look like after a reset in Logan's Run. You have what could be a depiction of an old world or a time between resets with Metrpololis. And you have all these wonderful ideas in all these different films that come out and are shown in many subconscious ways, which for some inexplicable reason, we're not supposed to talk about. And I'm really not sure why. But what exactly, which of the 5 films, for those of you who've seen them, are your favorite? Let me know right now. I'm curious. Ah, good one, Rebecca. That's right. And that's what we must always strive to. Courage, integrity, and evolution within the self. Not a physical evolution, a spiritual evolution. Internal. Ah. Good one, good one. Oh, Metrpololis. Okay. Yeah, Excalibur. You know, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just interested to hear, you know, which one's your favorite. Oh, yeah. John Boorman fan. Ooh, The Dark Crystal. Yeah, I'll have to cover that one. The movie, not the Netflix TV series. Although the Netflix TV series had a lot of potential. They just decided to stop it, you know, for reasons. Oh, yeah, they've got some really good ones. And to be honest with all of you, you know, I could watch any one of these films on any day and be really, really happy at any point in time. Well, thanks. I appreciate that, Awakening Soldier. Thank you very much. You know, and it's also interesting because a lot of these films were shown a lot on TBS, TNT back in the day. You don't really see them much anymore. I can't imagine why. That's, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, KC933. That's a very interesting film as well. And that was definitely a film that got overlooked a lot when it came out in the 90s. I remember that. Oh, yeah. Well, don't worry. If there's enough demand, we'll definitely do another old world and film connection. I think it works a lot better. Hey, Tara, good to see you. I think it works a lot better as a live stream because I appreciate the connection on it. Okie dokie. Since you brought this up, I have to ask, are you talking about the 1970s TV series or are you talking about the reimagined TV series? Now, I'm just going to say there's a lot of ammunition in both of them. So, oh, goodness. Highlander. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll probably open up something in the public poll and see what you think. And I'll do one for the members as well. Oh, yeah. Space 1999. All right. Well, maybe we'll have to come back and maybe make this a monthly exploration. Would you like that? Oh, gosh. Deer Hunter. Yeah, that's a really tough film to watch. It's a great film. And it's amazing what happened to Michael Cimino's career after that film, too, with Heaven's Gate. You know, and then people tried to say that when Kevin was making Dances with Wolves, that it was going to be Kevin's Gate. But hey, the film came out and Kevin showed everybody, right? Oh, yeah. I'm going to be honest. The original Battlestar Galactica is one of my favorites. I did enjoy the reimagined series, but for different reasons. Oh, yeah. Lord of the Rings. Always a good one, too. What is the secret of the Grail? Who does it serve? We must find what has been lost. The Grail. Where do we look for it? Search the land, far and wide. Look within. I've searched for 10 years and I've found nothing but sorrow and death, and I never thought to hear laughter again. He's not good enough. Hang him up in the tree with the others. Leave him. You are the last of us. Never give up the quest. I can't give up hope, Lancelot. It's all I have left. The Holy Chalice, also known as the Holy Grail. And yet it should be noted that there are two separate accounts of the origin of this Holy Chalice and Holy Grail. Official history states that these were two separate objects that were amalgamated into one. But what is the real origin of the Grail? We're informed that the Holy Chalice, as it was originally known, was the cup used by Christ in the Last Supper. It also caught the blood of Christ after he was pierced by the Holy Spear during his crucifixion. And therefore this was considered one of the most holy artifacts from the concept of Christianity and the baseline religion. It also continued to come up at various points in history. Consider the fact that there is a chalice, as it was originally called, that had actually caught the blood of our Lord and Savior, according to the basic tenets of Christianity. And therefore we would expect this chalice to have tremendous powers and capability, really being a true and bona fide holy artifact. Yet it's a conflicting account in the fact that there are many different depictions of this chalice throughout history, and it reappears again, according to the official history, as the Holy Grail from Arthurian legend, although looking into Arthurian legend becomes problematic from an official historical perspective, because once again there are conflicting accounts. And there's a lot of different symbolism when it comes to this Holy Grail. And that's where we have the differing accounts of these being different cups that yet became one. There was always the concept of the quest for the Holy Grail. And of course this being the very baseline holy object that came from the crucifixion in the Last Supper, that the knights of medieval times, at least as we think of our official history, would venerate it and find something worth questing for. And yet, oddly enough, the way it appears in Arthurian legend, we see the motivation behind this holy object, this holy artifact. And therefore, the accounts of both the Holy Grail and the Holy Chalice became one and the same. The Holy Chalice being the original cup that Christ used in the Last Supper and caught Christ's blood at the crucifixion, and then the Holy Grail, the sought-after artifact that was actually the same cup from medieval times. And yet when you look at a lot of the artwork and you read what is purported to be the original mythology of Arthurian legend, you can see that the Grail itself becomes the artifact that the knights are questing for. In fact, it is considered the most holy of quests. But what exactly does this have to do with the old world? Why do we look at these holy artifacts and assign such importance to them? Well, when we consider that this legend and these myths have never really gone away, and in fact, in many ways, they endure with us to modern fiction and even in our modern entertainment. And so the quest for the Holy Grail, or the quest for the Holy Chalice, whichever name you want to refer to it as, is something that still endures within our conscious minds, even in the most recent generations. The concept of the Fisher King from Arthurian legend, who was one of the last kings of Britain who retained possession and safeguarded the Grail. This is also reflected in the knights, the last surviving knight in the recent film, well, not so recent now, but Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And so why is it that the Grail endures? Is it because there is something more behind this object than we might like to think? Does it really have supernatural powers? And indeed, there are accounts that the Grail can provide everlasting life. There's also accounts that the false Grail can take life from the individual. And that's something else that's been depicted in many forms of entertainment and many stories. But is the quest for the Holy Grail considered one of the most noble quests of the Middle Ages? And the other question we have is, did these quests actually originate in the Middle Ages? Or was this merely a legend that is just attributed to the Middle Ages? Is it possible that these holy artifacts are very real and very bona fide, in the fact that they exist in depictions across cathedrals and churches and other pious edifices that exist across the land? It's not something that we could really ignore easily. The fact that it has such a lingering presence, not just within our conscious, but our subconscious as well. We even consider the so-called holy orders, or the groups of knights that went on their own quests, such as the Knights Templar, and indeed, they were affiliated with the quest for the Holy Grail. Oddly enough, it's a little different than some of the accounts that we have from the Arthurian legend, or the legends of King Arthur. But they still endure. And this seems to be something that perhaps all of these different military orders, whether they were the original remnants of the defense forces of the previous civilization, or if they were the military orders that we think of them as in our official history, they did ascribe a lot of importance to finding this object. There's also other conflicting details in what the power of these objects really were, and whether we're concerning ourselves with the Holy Chalice, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or any of the other great artifacts that we've gone over. Perhaps they are artifacts that did remain from earlier civilizations, that did have some sort of power that was endowed within them. And I certainly don't want to neglect the possibility that there really is a pious representation or something truly divine about these objects. The thing that we don't know is what the exact timeline is, and it seems as though we're to believe that there is a very defined timeline. We even have the connection of the Holy Grail with the use of alchemy, and even the Philosopher's Stone, the very concept of baseline creation. And if the legend of the Grail is true, that it provides eternal life, then is it also possible that the Grail could provide the very fabric of creation? Consider the artifacts that Indiana Jones found, at least in the original trilogy. Although, how he ended up with the idol, he must have acquired it from Belloc after Belloc was unfortunately exploded by the Ark of the Covenant. But in any event, when you look at these objects and the powers associated with them, this was something that was found in the original Indiana Jones trilogy, and it seemed to be lacking from the more recent films in the 2000s. The Grail and the stories behind it also reflect the eternal struggle between what we think of as good and evil. And is that really a struggle, or is it more about maintaining a balance? There's so many different legends and concepts that are affiliated with the Grail. We also think of the quest for the Grail, and it's probably depicted, at least in a film, in the best way, in the 1981 John Boorman film Excalibur, where the entire final third of the film is devoted to the quest for the Grail. And we see that the quest for the Grail involves suffering great hardships, and certainly great personal hardships. Percival and the other quest knights, to include Urians and Gawain and many others, meet a very untimely demise, and they find themselves beset by difficulty, tragedy, peril, and strife. And Percival witnesses the death of many of his comrades. And yet he continues to be persistent and never gives up the quest. And as he says to Lancelot, he can't give up hope because it's all he has left. So we have to ask the question, is the quest for the Grail an actual quest for an object? Or is it a mindset as well? A mindset that individuals used to have, and that some still do, that they never give up pursuing their goals. It's interesting when we consider these conflicting dimensions of what the Grail could really be about. Is it a philosophy, or is it an actual object that does have powers? Powers of creation and powers of bestowing eternal life. Although some would certainly argue, and probably quite effectively so, that eternal life is just as much a curse as it is a blessing. In our recent live stream exploration, we considered the account of Sir George and the Dragon. And to this day, you even have the Order of St. George that endures across the land and also within the United States Army, in addition with the Order of St. Michael. And if you're fortunate as a patron saint of infantry or armor, you can be inducted into these orders. We also have the continuing quest of how the military orders did search for the Grail, and that's also featured in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, as it refers to crusaders who were searching for the Grail, and only one was deemed worthy, and he became the safeguard of the Grail for hundreds of years. There's even the account of how Merlin may have played a role within the Grail, guiding the quest, and we also consider Merlin to be one of the original alchemists, and so yet it's another connection to the Philosopher's Stone through Merlin and Arthurian legend. But whatever the real nature of the Grail may be, it is a very compelling account that we have of its potential powers, its capabilities, and even the numerous quests and attempts to obtain the Grail. We realize that it becomes both an external and an internal focus. For the individuals that seek it, they do endure great strife. And yet while enduring that strife, they learn to embrace an inner strength that they didn't know that they had. And this tends to be the pure old world connection that we oftentimes witness. The ability of individuals to overcome the conflict within and seek their goals without. And strangely enough, that seems to be the very tale of Sir Percival that is displayed and depicted within the film Excalibur quite so well. Now, there's been many other films that have effectively depicted the quest for the Grail, but there's also yet another account of what the Grail could represent. And even though it may be a comical depiction of what it is, we have to consider the fact that searching for the Grail could simply be a fool's errand. And in the film Monty Python and the Holy Grail, we see that the Monty Python troupe out of the United Kingdom showed us the comical and strange pursuit for the Grail. That instead of it being a noble quest of knights who believed in honor and dignity and internal duty, they found themselves on a rather silly foray across the land, and really they're shown to be just a bunch of fools who have no real idea in terms of what they're doing. And comical shenanigans ensue. Now, of course, the argument would be, well, this was just simply a comedy film, and they were playing things very loosely because it was all about obtaining laughs. And yet, we also have to consider this account that there may be something to this, the ultimate fool's errand of going on a quest for something that may not exist. God is merely a representation of a cricketer player. And, of course, if this were made now, then who knows who God would be depicted as. Perhaps Patrick Mahomes, or any one of our great athletic heroes in the United States. But whatever the reality behind it, we see that Monty Python and the Holy Grail does provide a warning as well. That perhaps there is a fool's errand if we go on this quest searching for something that doesn't really exist. Now, it is entirely possible that that is indeed the origin of many of these quests, that they were just fool's errands. That there really wasn't any sort of grail, that it was just simply a very elaborate deception to see who would actually pursue it. Or as the old saying goes, to win is to lose, and those who lose will win. And what does it really mean? When you consider the ponderings of the less than competent King Arthur and Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you suddenly understand that these just seem to be people who have no ability to question things. And as a result of their deference to total authority and what they believe to be pious authority, they find themselves encountering a bizarre litany of situations which they are completely unable to overcome. And other characters in the film openly mock them, such as the French soldiers that they come across in the castle, who inform them that they have a grail, but it's quite clear that they don't. And oftentimes this involves mocking and humiliation for these characters. And yet they still persist in their quest to try to find the Holy Grail. And is that really what we're looking at when we consider these quests? Because these are hard questions that we have to consider. That perhaps this quest, while seeming like a noble and defined purpose, may really just be that. And then you suddenly find yourself coming across a killer bunny rabbit, which you have no capability to resist, and it very easily overcomes your knights, and you have no choice but to retreat in total humiliation. What does it all really represent, though? And perhaps you think I'm giving a little too much analysis to this movie. And yet there is a lot of intricate symbolism within this comedy film that, of course, is about the only way that we can communicate such things. There are defined warnings in terms of actually pursuing false quests. Because remember the concept of the false grail. The false grail can take life. As a false quest can take life. You suddenly devote yourself and all of your efforts and all of your time to pursuing a false quest. And is it safe to say that there are many false quests that are provided for us to this very day, that many of us embark upon? Indeed, as I said earlier, if you're in the United States Army, you could be inducted into the Order of St. George or the Order of St. Michael. And who knows, over time, perhaps they'll have an Order of St. Sycophantus, the very honorable and noble patron saint of you are the best manager of your own career and the PowerPoint slide of the storyboard. Who knows? Now, while I'm being a little facetious, I'm also being serious because for those of you who've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, this entire army of knights is stopped by 2 police cars, well actually a police car and a van, and about 4 police officers, one with a loudspeaker. And that's how the film ends. Now, of course, we understand that it's because they simply didn't have the budget to show a large battle scene. But I actually think that this ending that they innovated because of their budgetary limitations is far more appropriate. Because that is indeed how many of these great false quests tend to end. In some unfortunate reality where you're overcome by a very pathetic situation and you realize that this thing that you were pursuing wasn't real. But is there a real grail or chalice out there somewhere? Well, the Chalice of Valencia in Spain is stated to actually be potentially the real Holy Chalice from the Last Supper, and therefore the very Holy Grail that's been quested for. Does it really exist? Well, here's an image of it, and it's actually housed in the Cathedral of Valencia, interestingly enough. Officially known as Valencia Cathedral, and once again you see that it's a very elaborate, ornate, and well-detailed old-world structure. Indeed, it is well worthy of what we assign the title of cathedral to. And that's where one of these possible candidates for the real Holy Chalice or Holy Grail is housed to this very day. And isn't it intriguing that once again it is a defined and interesting old world structure with elaborate architecture on it? And so that continues to give rise to the question, what's the connection then between these objects that we consider holy objects or holy artifacts and the structures that they have to be housed in? Because you can see that this Valencia Cathedral is very ornate and detailed, including a portal door and the very large portal window, with fine geometric precision in both the door, the window, and even the baseline construction. The interior is no less incredible, and indeed the very area that this chalice is housed in has its own detailing to it. And there's many different perspectives that you can look at it and gain the idea that you're looking at the architectural capability of something that far exceeds anything that we could do to this day. And that's always the question that I ask, is this something, even this little altar, if you will, and all these little decorations behind it on this singular wall, could even this be accomplished today if vast resources were devoted to it? Perhaps. But would the quality of material be the same? And then the most important question, would it endure for hundreds of years? And could we actually achieve the same look? And what is the truth behind this holy chalice or Chalice of Valencia? We even have accounts that popes in the past used it during Mass to actually have the celebration of what is considered the most holy event in the Catholic Church, the communion, or taking the body and blood of Christ. And here we have the Chalice of Genoa, and oddly enough, a hexagonal chalice, not exactly what we'd think of as the traditional Holy Grail. And yet, once again, we're informed that this is some sort of special Egyptian glass, although who knows what the true nature of the composition of this material is. And again, we see interesting symbolism. And of course, this Chalice of Genoa is housed in this Genoa Cathedral, which, much like the cathedral in Valencia, is a very impressive old world structure, to include a wondrous tower, wondrous coloring and detailing, and a portal window. And so it continues to generate more questions. There's even a very unique lion that's guarding the front door, or the portal as it is again. And it has multiple portals. And I'm very impressed by the coloring scheme, and I'm also reminded of the cathedral in Florence when I look at this particular structure. And what else do these structures actually house? What's the real symbolism behind this lion that seemed to appear quite frequently more in the past? And why is it we have some lions that have wings and some that don't? What's the real meaning behind these portal windows with the intricate geometry behind them? And another question I'll ask is, can such portal windows like this be constructed to this day? Or, once again, is this something that's beyond our modern capabilities? The Genoa Cathedral also houses many other interesting objects. And just looking at the objects without doing any research in them, I thought we would take a look and get our initial impressions. Is this some sort of Ark of the Covenant, if you will? Is this some sort of other holy object? Or is this actually another remnant from the old world, showing the fine detailing across this chest or this great box that has incredible decoration? How do you even describe this? And what was its actual function and original use? Now I understand that it may be controversial to not look into the recorded background of these objects or the well-documented accounts behind them. But we also understand that wherever we came in civilization, we are very indoctrinated to indulge in recitation and repetition. And I thought we could gain a lot more just by looking at these objects without being biased in such a way, because that's really what it is. What does this represent? Is it entirely possible that these are real bona fide holy objects and they do have a divine connection to our understanding of whatever baseline religion that we're looking into may be? I fully accept that as a possibility. Or is it also possible that these are remaining objects from an older civilization, and that because of certain capabilities or certain methods of generating and channeling energy in ways that we may not fully understand, that they could have another purpose behind them? What exactly do we have here? Is this some sort of crystalline figure? Is this a modified lion with wings, or some other creature with wings? And you'll find many interesting curiosities when you look around at the storage areas or the official museums of these great cathedrals. You'll see objects like this that, if you look at with an objective eye, without a preconceived notion, you can have many different inspirations for what they may be telling you happened in the past. Because you do see some sort of divine glory when you look at objects such as this. And whether it is a legitimate spiritual glory or it reflects something else, perhaps these objects are telling us a story. A story that may be a little bit different than what we may think of as the story. The main events may still be quite similar. The Last Supper may have happened much closer to our present time than we may think, or it may have happened in a much more distant past than we're ready to believe. And when you look at these objects and you look at the many different icons and meanings within them, you have to really ponder what they could be telling us. Because this is something that we don't often find when we read books that tell us about the exact origins of these objects. And I'm always impressed at historians who don't actually record the history themselves coming up with explanations for these objects. For example, what exactly are we looking at here? Are these some sort of strange and unique armored hands that have some different origin story to them? Or could they reflect something else? Some more advanced technology, perhaps? It's also interesting to note that the cathedral in Genoa was struck by a shell from a British battleship. This was, of course, an accident, but interestingly enough, this shell, while it's stated to have penetrated the wall, did not explode and cause vast damage within the cathedral. And this is the ship that fired the shell, again accidentally, the HMS Malaya. So yet another example of old world architecture that somehow seems to be protected from the modern effects of weapons, although it could just be a great coincidence. But when you look at the interior of this Cathedral of Genoa, you again see the same detailing in incredible columns, arches, and fine geometrical precision that's shown in this architecture. Now, people will argue that we could, of course, achieve these architectural wonders today with the right focus and the right amount of monetary commitment, yet for some reason we just opt not to because it's difficult or everyone's all about saving money now, except when it involves certain pursuits. Interestingly enough, I included this image because when I transposed it for inclusion within this particular exploration, the visual was affected, and so I thought I would just leave it as is. Is it a statement that there's something unique going on, or is it just a reflection of a digital glitch? Hard to say. But I am impressed when you see the coloring scheme and you look at the precision of the columns and the pillars within structures such as this. And we consider the accounts of all these cathedrals across the land when we do these explorations. Is there a connection between these objects that we are informed and oftentimes fully believe are divine objects? And perhaps when we search for the Holy Grail or the Holy Chalice, that's really what we're searching for. That connection to the very original spirituality that we have with the land, and perhaps understanding our own past in a way that transcends the written accounts that we have, or all the well-documented writings that are simply repeated by generation after generation, if we take the historical account at face value. And I'd be remiss if I didn't show that this cathedral also had its own very impressive organ, because it's another way of knowing that you're actually in a bona fide old world structure. And so what is the account of the Holy Grail or Holy Chalice? Is it something from the earlier eras that later civilizations did seek? Or is it some remaining piece of technology from the Fourth Era? Is there something more to the Arthurian legend than we like to believe? Or in fact, was the account of King Arthur actually an account of one of the last great leaders of the previous civilization? These are all possibilities. And it seems odd that the very definition of King Arthur seems to be in conflict with what we're informed happened in the actual Middle Ages. And, of course, I'll always think of Nigel Terry as King Arthur from the film Excalibur, but that's just me. But what are your thoughts on the actual quest for the Holy Grail? Is it really a search across the land to the very ends of what we know of as the known lands, or the ends of the earth, as the saying goes? Or does it really reflect what's warned at in Monty Python and the Holy Grail? It's merely a fool's errand to where you can embrace a false quest. And I suppose the answer to that comes down to yourself. If you personally define the quest as worthwhile, then it's a quest that has great meaning. And no matter what trials or tribulations and losses that you face in your life, the quest will always have its meaning, and it will always be worthwhile. Whereas if you allow someone else to send you off on a quest that you don't really believe in, but you think you should believe in, simply for what you believe to be your own self-benefit, then it becomes a false quest. And then you are simply a fool who's going around the land, living in another's reality or another's dream. And that's the great warning. And perhaps keep that in mind the next time you enjoy the film Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But what are your thoughts on this quest for the Holy Grail? What do you believe is the reality behind these divine or holy objects that we have across the land? Is there some genuine meaning behind them? Or is it simply another example of what we're informed of happened during the Battle of Antioch, during the First Crusade? We're informed that one of the clergymen who accompanied the First Crusade found what they were told was the holy spear that actually pierced the side of Christ during the crucifixion. And even though many historical accounts say that it was not the actual Holy Lance that did so, it did motivate the Crusaders to break the siege that they were under and win the subsequent Battle of Antioch. Is it all just a fallacy, or is there actually genuine divinity within these objects? Perhaps the true answer, though, could be found in the existence of these very elaborate structures. These structures that contain an architectural knowledge and a commitment to geometric precision that we don't see in our modern architecture. Now, perhaps you accept the various explanations for why we don't do this, and I admit they could even be correct, although I find it very unlikely. But what are your thoughts? Is there a real grail out there? Do we already know where it is? Does it have the capabilities that were informed, or is it a fool's errand? Thank you for joining me. Please like, comment, and subscribe.